Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into these excerpts you sent us from Shawn Achor's book, Before Happiness.
Yeah,
It seems like you're really interested in learning how to shape your mindset to achieve greater success and happiness.
definitely.
And you've come to the right place. We're going to be diving into some of Achor's most fascinating ideas today.
Yeah, we got a lot to unpack.
Yeah, there's a lot there. And he kicks off his book by kind of challenging this assumption that we all have that IQ is the key to success.
Right, like just being smart.
Exactly. But he doesn't just like stop there and say, oh, emotional intelligence is important too. He kind of goes a step further.
He does, yeah. He introduces this idea of a prism of success.
Yeah.
So all those different types of intelligence, right? Your IQ, your emotional intelligence, your social intelligence, they're all important, but they need like a strong foundation to really shine.
I see.
And that's where positive genius comes in. That's the foundation Achor's talking about.
And he uses this really cool analogy to explain it.
Oh, yeah.
He talks about, Thales, this ancient Greek philosopher.
Oh, yeah.
Who figured out how to measure the pyramids.
Right.
And it's like, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't have the right perspective, you're not going to see the full picture.
Absolutely. It's about having like the right tools, A&D, the right mindset.
Exactly.
Like you got to be able to see the whole pyramid, not just one side of it.
So what is this positive genius thing? How do we actually like cultivate that?
So think of it like this positive genius is the ability to like construct a positive reality first.
Okay.
It's about training your brain to spot those possibilities instead of just like getting stuck on the problems.
So you're not like ignoring problems, you're just approaching them with a more positive outlook.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And when you do that, all those other intelligences you have, they become way more powerful.
Interesting. So it's almost like positivity is like the fuel that powers all those other skills and talents.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually like apply this in our everyday lives?
Well, Achor tells this hilarious story about being on a nuclear submarine
Oh, really?
during a drill.
Oh, wow.
And the sub tilts like so dramatically that the floor is no longer the floor.
What?
Yeah. But the commander, he stays calm.
Wow.
He doesn't freak out. He just finds a new reference point.
So instead of getting stuck in that old reality, like where the floor was the floor,
Yeah.
he adapted.
Right. He adapted and found a new way to navigate the situation.
Is that kind of what we need to do with our mindsets?
Exactly. Our brains are constantly interpreting information, right?
Yeah.
What Achor's highlighting is that we have way more control over that process than we think.
Okay.
We can choose how we make sense of things, even when things are tough or stressful.
So like we're not just victims of circumstance, we actually have a say in how we experience things.
Exactly. And there's actually this study Achor mentions where they changed people's perception of stress, and it actually reduced the negative physical effects of that stress.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's wild.
So it's not about pretending everything's perfect.
No.
It's about realizing there are different ways to look at the same reality.
Right, like stress can be debilitating, sure, but it can also be like a motivator, a signal that something important's happening.
I see.
It's about how you frame it.
So the question becomes like, which reality will you choose?
Exactly.
And that seems to be like the heart of this idea of reality architecture, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's not just about passively accepting whatever comes our way. It's about actively shaping our perception of the world.
Exactly. And Achor gives us some really practical techniques for doing just that.
Okay.
He calls them the 3 pillars of reality architecture. Recognizing alternatives, adding vantage points, and controlling your mental fuel.
Ooh, I like that. So let's break those down a little bit.
Okay.
I'm really curious about this idea of recognizing alternatives.
Okay, so remember that study we mentioned where people reduced their stress by like 23%?
Yeah.
It all came down to them focusing on the positive aspects of stress.
So the facts didn't change, but their perception of those facts did.
Exactly.
It's kind of like the whole glass half full thing, right?
Yeah, you got it.
You're not denying reality, you're just choosing to focus on a different aspect of it.
Right.
Okay, I like that. Now, what about this adding vantage points thing? What's that all about?
So for this one, Achor uses the simple experiment.
Okay.
He asks people to draw a coffee cup.
Okay.
Most people will draw it from the side view, right?
That makes sense.
But they totally miss the top-down view.
Oh, I see.
And that limited perspective, it can actually hinder problem solving.
It's like how sometimes we get so stuck in our own way of seeing things that we miss obvious solutions.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a good one. And then the last one, controlling your mental fuel.
All right.
What's that all about?
Okay, so Think of your brain like a car that runs on glucose.
I-
The problem is, we often schedule our toughest tasks for when our brains are running on fumes.
Like trying to answer emails at like midnight when you're exhausted.
Yes. Or like making a big decision right before lunch when you're starving.
Yeah, totally. I'm so guilty of that.
We all are.
And that really impacts our decision-making.
Absolutely.
Achor compares our decision-making process to navigating with a mental map. And if that map is like missing details or based on outdated info, we're going to get lost.
Right.
Okay, so we got to make sure our mental maps are accurate and complete. But how do we do that?
That's where meaning markers come in.
Meaning markers. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, these are like the landmarks on your mental map. You know,
Okay.
the things that truly matter to you, your values, your passions, your goals.
So if my work is like aligned with those meaning markers, it's going to feel more meaningful, less stressful, and I'll be more motivated.
Exactly. And get this, Achor says that 93% of 95-year-old men were still working
Wow.
because their jobs were meaningful to them.
That's incredible. 93%.
It's amazing, right? It really shows how important it is to find that sense of purpose in what you do.
That's so powerful.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so finding those meaning markers and making sure they're like prominent on our mental maps, that seems like a really crucial step.
Absolutely.
But is it really that simple?
Well, Achor throws in a little twist here.
Oh, no.
He warns us about something called map hijackers.
Ooh, map hijackers. What are those?
Think of them like negative attitudes disguised as meaning.
Okay.
So, for example, someone who's obsessed with getting a promotion, but only because they think it'll make them feel better about themselves.
I see.
That's a map hijacker.
So it's not really about the work itself or contributing to a larger goal. It's about feeding some kind of insecurity.
Exactly.
And I can see how that would like totally derail you.
It drains, meaning it pulls you off course.
So how do we like avoid falling into those tracks? How do we spot those hijackers?
You got to be honest with yourself about why you want something and what effects you actually expect it to have. If those answers are rooted in like negativity or insecurity, you might be dealing with a hijacker.
That's a good point. And it makes me think about, Achor talks about this fascinating study about drug addicts in Baltimore,
Oh, yeah.
where they actually mapped out the physical routes of the addicts.
Right.
And they found that certain environmental triggers would lead them to either relapse or to recovery.
It's amazing how our surroundings can influence us like that.
It is. And it makes me wonder if we apply that to this idea of map hijackers, it's not just about our internal mindset.
Right.
It's also about being aware of the external triggers in our environment.
Exactly.
That might be leading us astray.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so it's like a two-pronged approach. You got to look inward and outward.
Totally.
That's really interesting. And it makes me wonder, are there other things besides those external triggers that can kind of mess with our mental maps?
There are, yeah. And that brings us to Achor's next big idea, noise canceling.
Noise canceling. Okay, I'm intrigued.
So Achor compares our brains to radios trying to tune into a signal amidst a sea of static.
Yeah.
The problem is our world is incredibly loudy.
Oh, yeah. Feel that.
Not just externally, but internally too.
So it's like the actual noise of the world around us, plus all the mental chatter going on in our own heads.
Exactly. It's a lot to deal with.
It is. And it's no wonder we get distracted and overwhelmed.
Totally. And to illustrate this, Achor uses this analogy of lions versus rabbits.
Okay, interesting.
So, back in prehistoric times, our survival depended on being like super aware of threats, right?
Yeah.
But even though we're not like living in constant danger anymore, our brains are still kind of wired for that fight or flight response.
So we're like rabbits constantly on the lookout for lions, even though there are no lions around.
Exactly. And in today's world, that translates into this like overabundance of negativity and fear.
Which can then lead us to make some pretty bad decisions.
Exactly. It clouds our judgment,
Right.
makes us act impulsively.
It's like that story Achor tells about that financial guy, Jim Cramer, whose stock predictions are like notoriously loud,
Right.
but not always accurate.
Loudness doesn't equal accuracy.
Exactly. So we got to be careful about mistaking loudness for importance or truth.
For sure.
Okay, so how do we start to become better noise cancelers? Like, how do we filter out all that mental static and tune into the signal that matters?
So Achor offers a few strategies. One is to be more mindful of the information you're taking in.
Okay.
Like ask yourself, is this source reliable? Is this information relevant to my goals? Is it helping or hurting my mindset?
So be more intentional about what we're reading, watching, listening to.
Exactly. Another strategy is to practice mindfulness techniques.
Okay.
Paying attention to the present moment without judgment.
Right.
It helps us become more aware of our thoughts and feelings so we can start to recognize those like rabbit brain anxieties when they pop up.
So if we're not aware of them, we can't really challenge them or change them.
Right.
That's a good point. And it makes me think about those 3 mental waves that Achor talks about.
Oh, yeah, those are great.
Those are like powerful tools for combating that internal noise, right?
They are.
Why don't we just quickly recap those for our listeners?
Okay, so the first wave is all about keeping your worry in proportion to the likelihood of the event. So it's about challenging those catastrophic thoughts and asking, how likely is it that this worst-case scenario will actually happen?
Right. Because usually our fears are way more exaggerated than reality.
Exactly.
Okay. And what about the second wave?
The second wave is a reminder to not ruin good days by dwelling on bad ones. We can acknowledge challenges without letting them dominate our whole outlook.
So focus on the positive even when things are tough.
Exactly.
Love it. Okay. And the third wave?
The third wave is a reminder that worrying doesn't equal loving or being responsible.
That's a good one.
You can care deeply about your loved ones without constantly worrying about them.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance between caring and obsessing.
Right.
Because sometimes that worry can actually be harmful.
It can.
To our relationships and to our own well-being.
Yeah, totally.
It seems like all 3 waves are really about like taking control of our thoughts and emotions instead of letting them control us.
Exactly. It's about being the driver, not the passenger.
I like that. And this whole noise canceling thing, it's connected to that idea of reality architecture we talked about earlier, right?
Yeah.
It's like noise canceling is a key part of building a positive reality.
Right.
Because if we're constantly bombarded with negativity, it's going to be really hard to see those possibilities and opportunities.
It's like trying to see the stars in the middle of Times Square.
Yeah, you need that darkness to really appreciate the light.
Exactly.
Okay, that's awesome. And this brings us back to that idea of positive inception, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Which, remember, is all about intentionally spreading positivity and creating that ripple effect. Achor talks about franchising positive habits and behaviors.
Right.
And using the power lead to kind of shift the tone of our interactions. But it seems like this noise canceling thing is like a prerequisite for all of that.
It is, yeah.
Because if we're like drowning in negativity, it's going to be really hard to be a source of positivity for others.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah, noise canceling is like creating that fertile ground for positivity to grow.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It's like clearing out the weeds so those positive seeds can take root.
Exactly. You got to make space for the good stuff to flourish.
That's awesome. So it's like an inside-out approach.
Yeah, you got it.
You got to cultivate that positive internal environment before you can effectively spread that positivity outward.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
That's so cool. Okay, and this leads me to another thing that I found really fascinating in these excerpts, this idea of storytelling.
Oh, yeah. Storytelling is huge.
Yeah, Achor really emphasizes how stories can create these shared realities, especially the ones that focus on overcoming adversity.
Right.
And he uses that really powerful example of the MS champions, whose videos were like way more impactful than any like scientific data could ever be.
It's amazing, right?
It is. Why do you think that is? Why are stories so effective?
I think it's because they tap into something deeper than just logic and facts,
Yeah.
They allow us to connect with these shared human experiences, especially the ones that involve overcoming challenges. When we hear stories from people who've been through similar struggles,
Yeah.
it gives us hope and motivation to face our own.
It's like we learn best through experience, whether it's our own experience or the experiences of others.
Totally. And stories provide this powerful way to share those experiences and connect with others on a deeper level.
That's so true. And Achor also makes this really key point about the power of peer narratives.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we're more likely to be inspired by people who are kind of like us, who are walking a similar path.
It's easier to relate to someone who's in the same boat. you know?
Yeah. Makes those stories feel more achievable.
Exactly.
So what are some ways that we can like tap into the power of storytelling in our own lives?
Well, think about the challenges you faced and overcome. What lessons did you learn? How did those experiences shape who you are today?
Right.
Sharing those stories can be so powerful.
Yeah. It's about turning our personal experiences into something that can benefit others.
Exactly. And those stories don't have to be about like overcoming these massive obstacles.
Right.
Sometimes the most inspiring stories are about the small, everyday victories.
Yeah.
The moments when we chose positivity over negativity, resilience over giving up.
It's those little moments that remind us that we're all in this together
Hmm.
and that even small acts of courage and kindness can make a difference.
Absolutely. Every little bit counts.
This has been such a great conversation, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of what Achor has to offer in Before Happiness.
I know, right? There's so much more to explore.
There is. But even these few excerpts have given us a lot to think about and apply in our own lives.
Totally. Food for thought, for sure.
It is. So to our listeners, we hope this deep dive into Before Happiness has been a valuable experience.
Yeah, we hope you enjoyed it.
And remember, you have the power to choose happiness, to cultivate positivity, and to create a life that's filled with meaning and purpose and joy.
Absolutely.
So what will you do today to start building that reality? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, share your takeaways with us on social media using hashtag The Deep Dive.
Until next time, keep diving deep and keep choosing happiness.
See ya.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We're continuing our exploration of Shawn Achor's Before Happiness, and in these excerpts you've shared, it seems like you're really digging into this idea of noise canceling.
Yeah, it's a crucial concept,
Yeah.
especially in our world today. Like, everything's so hyper-connected, and there's just constant information overload.
It's so true. Like, how do we even filter it all?
Exactly, and that's what Achor's getting at. He's saying that to cultivate a positive mindset, we really need to become masters at filtering out all that noise that's bombarding us from every direction.
Okay, I'm with you so far, but can you break it down a bit more? What exactly does he mean by noise?
Well, he makes this really interesting point about the difference between signal and noise.
Okay.
Signal is like the information that's truly valuable to us. It's the stuff that's relevant to our goals. It's accurate and it's actionable.
Okay, so that's the good stuff, the stuff we want to pay attention to.
Exactly. And then noise is everything else.
Yeah.
All the irrelevant stuff, the inaccurate stuff, the distracting stuff.
Okay, so it's the stuff that's cluttering our minds and kind of draining our energy.
Precisely. It's like mental junk food.
I like that analogy. So learning to differentiate between signal and noise, that's kind of essential for building that positive reality we talked about in part 1.
Absolutely. It's like trying to have a conversation at a rock concert.
Oh, yeah.
You can strain to hear the person in front of you, but the music's just so loud that it's impossible to really focus on what they're saying.
Right.
And our mental landscape, it could be like that concert, where the noise is just drowning out the signal that we actually need to hear.
That makes total sense. And it reminds me of that whole lions versus rabbits analogy that Achor talks about.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's fascinating how our brains are wired to focus on the negative even when we're not in actual danger.
Right. It's a survival mechanism from way back, when we were living in caves and constantly on the lookout for predators.
Right, like saber-toothed tigers and stuff.
Leg. And back then, being hyper aware of those threats was essential for staying alive,
Yeah, if you weren't paying attention, you might get eaten.
Exactly. But the thing is, our environment has changed dramatically, but our brains haven't quite caught up.
So we're still scanning for lions, even though most of us aren't facing any real danger on a daily basis.
Precisely. We're still stuck in that rabbit mode.
Yeah.
Always on high alert, even though there are no lions around.
Which I guess explains why we can get so caught up in negative news and anxieties and worries.
Exactly. We're bombarded with negativity from all sides, and our brains are primed to focus on it.
And all that negativity, it can really take a toll,
It does. It can lead to stress, overwhelm, poor decision-making, all sorts of problems.
Yeah, it's not good.
It's not. And Achor gives that great example of Jim Cramer, the financial commentator,
Oh, yeah, the guy from Mad Money.
Exactly. And his stock predictions, they're notoriously loud and dramatic.
Right.
But they're not always, right?
Exactly. Loudness doesn't necessarily equal accuracy.
Exactly. And that's something we all need to keep in mind. We often mistake loudness for importance or truth, and that can lead us down the wrong path.
So true. Okay, so let's get practical here. How do we actually start to become better noise cancelers? How do we tune out all that mental static and focus on the signal that matters?
Okay, well, Achor offers a few strategies that I think are really helpful.
Okay, I'm all ears.
One is to be more mindful of the information you're consuming,
Okay.
Really pay attention to where you're getting your information from. Ask yourself, is this source reliable? Is this information relevant to my goals?
Right.
Is it helping or hurting my mindset?
So it's about being more intentional about what we're reading, watching, listening to.
Exactly. Don't just passively absorb everything that comes your way. Be selective.
That's a good point. And what about like internal noise? How do we deal with all the mental chatter that's going on in our own heads?
Well, for that taker, Iger recommends practicing mindfulness techniques,
Okay.
which is all about paying attention to the present moment without judgment. Just noticing your thoughts and feelings without getting carried away by them.
Right. And that can be really hard, especially when you have a lot of anxiety.
It can be, but like any skill, it takes practice.
Yeah.
And the more you practice, the easier it becomes to just observe those thoughts without letting them control you.
So it's not about like suppressing thoughts or pretending they're not there. It's about just becoming more aware of them.
Exactly. And that awareness gives you the power to choose how you respond to those thoughts.
That makes sense. And it reminds me of those 3 mental waves that we talked about earlier.
Oh, yeah, those are great for combating internal noise.
They are. Why don't we quickly recap those for our listeners?
Okay, so the first wave is all about keeping your worry in proportion to the likelihood of the event, So it's about challenging those catastrophic thoughts, the ones that say, oh my God, the world is ending.
Right.
And asking yourself, okay, how likely is it that this worst case scenario is actually going to happen?
Because most of the time our fears are way more exaggerated than reality.
Exactly. So the first wave is about getting some perspective,
Love it. Okay, what about the second wave?
The second wave reminds us to not ruin good days by dwelling on bad ones.
Ah, yeah, that's a good one.
We can acknowledge that challenges exist, but we don't have to let them dominate our whole outlook.
So it's about focusing on the positive even when things are tough.
Precisely. It's about finding that balance.
Okay, awesome. And the third wave?
The third wave is a reminder that worrying doesn't equal loving or being responsible.
That's a powerful one.
It is, because we often think that if we're not constantly worrying about our loved ones, then we don't really care about them.
Right, like we're being negligent or something.
Exactly. But Achor's saying that's not true. You can care deeply about people without constantly worrying about them. In fact, excessive worrying can actually be harmful to our relationships.
It's about finding that balance between caring and obsessing.
Right, because worry doesn't actually solve problems, it just amplifies them.
Totally. It seems like all 3 of these waves are really about like taking control of our thoughts and emotions instead of letting them control us.
Exactly. It's about being the driver, not the passenger.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And this whole noise canceling thing, it's really connected to that idea of reality architecture that we talked about in part 1.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Like, it seems like noise canceling is kind of a key part of building a positive reality.
It is, yeah, because if we're constantly bombarded with negativity, it's going to be really hard to see those possibilities and opportunities.
Yeah. It's like trying to see the stars in the middle of Times Square.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You need that darkness to really appreciate the light.
So true. Okay, so noise canceling is important, but then what?
Well, that's where positive inception comes back in.
Right.
Yeah.
Spreading that positivity, creating that ripple effect.
Exactly. Remember, Achor talks about franchising positive habits and behaviors and using the power lead to shift the tone of our interactions.
Yeah, those are great strategies, but it seems like noise canceling is kind of a prerequisite for all of that.
It is, yeah, because if we're drowning in negativity, it's going to be pretty hard to be a source of positivity for others.
Totally. It's like you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. Noise canceling is like creating that fertile ground for positivity to grow,
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like clearing out the weeds so that those positive seeds can take root and flourish.
Precisely. You got to make space for the good stuff.
That's so awesome. It's like an inside-out approach,
Yeah, you got it.
You got to cultivate that positive internal environment before you can effectively spread that positivity outward.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
That's so cool. And this leads me to another thing that I found really fascinating in these excerpts, this idea of storytelling.
Oh yeah, storytelling is huge. Achor really emphasizes how stories can create these shared realities, especially the ones that focus on overcoming adversity.
It's so true. Like he gives that powerful example of the MS champions whose videos had a way bigger impact than like any scientific data ever could.
It's amazing, isn't it, the power of stories?
It is. Why do you think they're so effective?
I think it's because they connect with us on an emotional level.
Yeah.
They tap into our empathy and they allow us to see the world through someone else's eyes. And when we hear stories from people who face challenges and come out stronger, it gives us hope and motivation to do the same.
It's like we learn best through experience, whether it's our own or the experiences of others.
Totally. And stories provide this powerful way to share those experiences and connect with others on a deeper level.
That's so true. And Achor makes this really key point about the impact of peer narratives.
Oh, yeah, like we're more likely to be inspired by people who are kind of like us.
Exactly. Like people who are walking a similar path, who face similar challenges.
It makes the stories feel more real, more achievable.
Totally. Because if they can do it, maybe I can too.
Exactly. It gives you that sense of possibility.
Okay, so how can we tap into that power of storytelling in our own lives?
Well, think about the challenges you've faced and overcome. What lessons did you learn from those experiences? How do they shape who you are today?
Right.
Sharing those stories can be so powerful, both for you and for the people who hear them.
It's about turning our personal experiences into something that can benefit others.
Exactly. And those stories don't have to be about overcoming these massive obstacles, you
Right.
know? Sometimes the most inspiring stories are about the small, everyday victories. The moments when we chose positivity over negativity, resilience over giving up.
Totally. It's about those little moments of triumph that remind us that we're all in this together, and that even small acts of courage and kindness can make a difference.
Absolutely. Every little bit counts.
And sometimes a bit of humor can go a long way, too.
Oh, yeah. Humor is huge.
Yeah. How does that fit into this whole positive inception thing?
Well, Achor talks about how humor is this powerful tool for creating connection and diffusing tension. It can help us see things from a different perspective and find that lightheartedness even in challenging situations.
So it's not just about being positive all the time. It's about finding those moments of joy and levity along the way.
Exactly. And humor can be a great way to break down barriers with people. Make those tough conversations a little bit easier and help us connect on a more human level.
It's so true. I think sometimes we take ourselves way too seriously,
We do. We all do.
And a little bit of laughter can go a long way in shifting our perspective and creating a more positive environment.
I'm totally with you on that one.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, we've talked a lot about the importance of noise canceling. Creating that mental space where positivity can flourish. We've explored this idea of positive inception, how we can intentionally spread positivity through our actions, our words, our stories.
Right.
We've touched on the role of humor in making that whole process a little bit more fun and enjoyable.
It's been a great conversation, and I feel like we've only scratched the surface of what Achor has to offer in Before Happiness.
I know, right? There's so much good stuff in there.
There is, but even these few excerpts have given us a lot to think about and apply in our own lives.
Totally. It's all about taking action.
It is. So remember cultivating a positive mindset. It's a journey. It's not about reaching some perfect state of bliss. It's about making those small intentional choices each day to focus on the good, to challenge negativity, and to spread a little bit of joy along the way.
Well said.
Stay tuned for part 3 of our deep dive, where we'll be exploring some final insights from Achor's book and talking about some practical ways to apply all these ideas in our everyday lives.
Welcome back to the deep dive. So we're in the final part of our deep dive into Shawn Achor's Before Happiness. And based on the excerpts you shared, it seems like you're really ready to take all these ideas we've been talking about and actually put them into practice.
Absolutely. Like, what's the point of all this knowledge if we don't actually use it right?
Exactly. It's all about application. And Achor definitely doesn't disappoint in that department. He provides so many practical tools and techniques to help us actually make those changes in our lives.
He does. Yeah, like his book's not just theory. It's really about giving people actionable steps.
It is. So in the first 2 parts, we talked about building that foundation of positive genius and choosing our reality and becoming expert noise cancelers.
Right, like laying the groundwork. Exactly. But it all comes down to this. How do we actually make lasting changes, in our mindset and our behavior?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And Achor has some really insightful answers.
Okay, lay it on me.
Well, one of the big things he emphasizes is the power of small, consistent actions.
Okay.
It's not about making some radical overnight transformation.
Right.
It's about those tiny tweaks to our habits and routines that over time lead to big results.
He calls this positive rituals, right?
Yes.
And he gives some great examples, like writing down 3 things you're grateful for each day, or doing a random act of kindness.
Or taking a few minutes to meditate or exercise.
It's like training your brain for positivity,
Yeah.
Just like you'd train your body for a marathon.
I love that analogy.
You wouldn't expect to just run 26 miles on your first day of training, would you?
No way.
You'd start with short runs and gradually build up your endurance.
Exactly. And it's the same with our mindset. We got to start small and build from there.
Yeah, totally. And one of the things I really appreciate about Achor's approach is that it's not just like fluffy feel-good stuff.
Right.
It's grounded in science.
Totally. He's not just telling us to think positive. He's showing us how it actually changes our brains and bodies.
It does, yeah. He talks about how positive emotions actually broaden our awareness and expand our capacity for creativity and problem solving.
It's like positivity gives us this wider lens to view the world through.
I love that, wider lens. And that wider lens allows us to see more possibilities, to connect with people more easily, and to bounce back from challenges more quickly.
Exactly. It's like positivity is this superpower that helps us thrive.
I like that. Achor also talks about the importance of social support and connection. It's not just about our individual mindset.
Right. It's about creating a positive environment around us, too.
Exactly. Because we're social creatures, and the people we surround ourselves with, they have a huge impact on our well-being.
They do.
Yeah.
And Achor really encourages us to, cultivate relationships with positive, supportive people.
Right. People who uplift and inspire us.
Exactly. And he even suggests creating a positive posse.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
Yeah, it's like your own personal cheer squad,
Exactly. People who are going to support you on that journey to greater happiness and success.
It's brilliant. And it goes back to that idea of positive inception that we talked about earlier. We can be a source of positivity for others, and they can be a source of positivity for us.
It's like a win-win situation.
Exactly. Everyone benefits.
We say so surrounding ourselves with positive people, that's one thing, but what about those negative social scripts that we often get stuck in?
Oh, yeah. Those can be tricky.
We talked about the power lead in part 2.
Yeah.
Do you have any other tips for, changing those unproductive patterns of behavior?
Well, Achor suggests becoming more aware of the language we use.
Oh,
He points out how often we use negative or limiting language without even realizing it.
you mean like saying, I can't, or it's impossible,
Exactly.
or I'm not good enough?
Yeah, all those phrases that just reinforce those negative beliefs.
Right. It's like we're programming ourselves for failure.
It is. Yeah, and Achor challenges us to replace those phrases with more positive and empowering language.
So instead of I can't, it's I'm learning.
Exactly.
Or instead of it's impossible, it's let's explore some options.
Yeah, it's about shifting our focus from limitations to possibility.
That's such a simple shift,
Yeah.
but it can make a huge difference.
It can. Our words have so much power.
Yeah, they do. And this whole conversation, it really brings me back to one of the most powerful takeaways from Achor's book for me.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
It's this idea that happiness is not something that just happens to us,
Right.
It's something that we can actively cultivate. It's a choice we make every single day.
I'm so with you on that one. Achor really challenges that traditional idea that success leads to happiness.
Right.
He's flipping the script and saying that happiness is actually a prerequisite for success.
It's like happiness fuels success, not the other way around.
Exactly. And when we make that choice to prioritize happiness, to cultivate those positive emotions and habits, we create this virtuous cycle where success and fulfillment just naturally flow.
I love that. It's like setting ourselves up for success from the inside out.
Exactly.
Wow, this has been such an insightful deep dive into Achor's work. I feel like we've been given this whole new toolkit for creating a more positive and successful life.
It's a great book, isn't it?
Yeah.
So much wisdom packed into those pages.
It is. But as we wrap up, is there one key takeaway that you'd like our listeners to remember?
If I had to pick just one, it would be this. Positive genius. It's not some innate trait that you're either born with or not.
Great.
It's a skill that can be developed with practice.
Okay.
Just like we can train our bodies to be stronger and healthier, we can train our minds to be more positive and resilient.
And that practice doesn't have to be complicated, you know?
Doesn't.
It can start with something as simple as writing down those 3 things you're grateful for, or taking a few minutes to just focus on your breath.
Exactly. Small, consistent actions repeated over time, they can lead to huge changes.
So to our listeners, we hope this deep dive into Before Happiness has been valuable.
We hope you enjoyed it.
And remember, you have the power to choose happiness, to cultivate positivity, and to create a life that's filled with meaning, purpose, and joy.
Absolutely. It's all within your reach.
So what will you do today to start building that reality? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your takeaways with us on social media using #TheDeepDive. And until next time, keep diving deep and keep choosing happiness.